So a lot of people think that the bride of Christ is going to be raptured, and they're very excited about that. They use a lot of bridal imagery, a lot of Galilean or Hebrew wedding imagery to illustrate how Christ is going to come, get his bride, and take her home. Unfortunately, that is not the imagery or the symbolism that's used in the book of Revelation. What is used is actually that of sons who are going to be caught up to rule with Christ during the millennium. So that is our destiny, actually, during the millennium. As believers, we are going to rule and reign with Christ on the earth. So there's this passage in John chapter 14, verses 1 and 2, that a lot of people use to support the idea of wedding imagery or bridal imagery, and that there is going to be this bride that's caught up into heaven. And I'm going to read the passage for you, and then I'm going to explain what Jesus is, what I think he's actually talking about. It's not wedding imagery at all. John 14, starting verse 1. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And when I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. The common interpretation of this passage among pre-tribulation rapture people is that this is wedding imagery, that Christ is going away like a bridegroom who's just been betrothed to a bride. He's going to add on to his Father's house and create this place for his bride and him to live in. And then once it's done and the Father says, go get your bride, then he'll come back, and that's when the church or the bride is going to be raptured. Okay, now none of that is actually in prophetic scriptures. None of that is in the book of Revelation. You're not going to see that in Revelation. What you're going to see is what I'm going to explain to you. Okay, so the rapture is not the rapture of a bride. There are various groups of what are called sons who are going to be brought into heaven at different times. And in fact, this firstborn son, the ones who are going to rule and reign, like we see the 24 elders doing in heaven, they're going to be caught up. That is harpazoed, raptured to God and to his throne. And that's exactly where we see the 24 elders. But what about this passage in John 14, where Jesus says that he goes to prepare a place for them? In my Father's house are many rooms. And if it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? In God's house, there are already many rooms. There's a lot of rooms. There's a lot of space. What Jesus is doing, he's going to go and prepare a place for them. He's not adding on to his Father's house. There's already plenty of room. So what does it mean that he's going to prepare a place for them? Well, what the apostles were interested in, and Jesus is talking to the disciples here, the 12 disciples. On the night Jesus was betrayed, he had this supper, and in the Gospel of John, chapters 13 through about 17, we have something called the upper room discourse. This is where Jesus is talking during this long supper, and he's talking to his disciples, and he's trying to bring them to a place where they state that they believe that Jesus was sent from God. The thing that the disciples wanted, they didn't want to know, well, was there enough room in heaven for them? That was not a question. What the disciples were wanting was a position in Christ's kingdom. James and John wanted to rule on one side, the left and the right hand of Jesus in the coming kingdom. They wanted a position. They were looking for a position. All right, so position and place in the Hebrew New Testament thinking, they go together. A position and a place go together. And I'm going to try and prove that to you now. I want to go back to John chapter 11. And this is about the priests had a position in the temple. The temple was the place. Their role as priests was the position. if something happened to the temple, the place, they wouldn't have a position, okay? Because position and place go together. That's the way people thought about it in the first century. And I'm going to show you a number of passages that talk about that. John 11, we'll start with verse 47. So the chief priests and Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we going to do? For this man performs many signs." And Jesus had just risen Lazarus from the dead. "If we let him go on thus, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and destroy both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You do not understand that it is expedient for you that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation should not perish." Okay, and goes on to talk about how Caiaphas, being the high priest, was actually prophesying the death of Christ. The point I want to make here is that Caiaphas was saying that if everybody believes in Jesus, the Romans were going to come in and destroy their place. And if their place, that is the temple, was destroyed, they would lose their position as well, who they were in that whole system. I want to look at another passage here in Luke 16. This is the story of the unrighteous steward. A steward was somebody who had what's called a stewardship. And we don't even use this kind of language, really. So we're not accustomed to thinking this way. And because we don't think like this, we sort of superimpose our own ideas on what this means. But back in the day, someone who had a large estate or, had a lot of stuff would have people working for him. They would just be working for him. Okay, so a guy might have someone like an accountant, but it's just his accountant. This accountant isn't working for anybody else. He's just working for the master. If you work for him, you also have a place there. You have it's where you live. It's sort of like if you're a nanny nowadays, or you're a live-in au pair or something like that. Some people have live-in housekeepers. That you have a place to live as well as have a position. So the position goes and the place go together. So in this instance here, Jesus is telling this story about a rich man who had a steward. So let's read the story. "There was a rich man who had a steward, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. And he called him and he said to him, 'What's this I hear about you? Turn in an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be a steward.'" So he had to do the books and get ready to hand the books into his master. And the steward said to himself, "What am I going to do, since my master is taking the stewardship away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I've decided what to do so that people may receive me into their houses when I've put out of the stewardship." So I want you to notice this. The steward said, once I'm out of here, I don't have a place to live. I'm too weak to dig, and I'm too ashamed to beg. I need a place to live. So this is what he said he was going to do. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly and just write 50. And then he said to another, "How much do you owe?" And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, "Take your bill and write 80. And the master commended the dishonest steward for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light." Okay, and I'm not going to go into what the meaning of this parable is. What I want to point out is this, is that a stewardship required you to have a position in the home, and you lived there. So as long as you were doing your stewardship, and you were pleasing the master, you had a home to live in and you had a job to do. So what Jesus was saying to the disciples in John 14 is, in my Father's house, there's a lot of room, and I'm going to prepare a position for you. Okay, so I will come and get you, and you will come and you will have a position in my Father's house. You're going to have a stewardship. Okay, you're going to have a stewardship. And it's interesting here that Jesus says the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with this generation than the sons of light. Okay, we're not talking about a bride here. We're talking about positions of stewardship. And this is what Jesus also said in other parables, that if you're faithful in a little, whatever stewardship you have now, it can be very small. It doesn't have to be big. If you're faithful in it, you're going to get put over much. And this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about being faithful in a small stewardship so that we can be put over a larger one during the millennium. Okay, we're sons of God who are going to be having a larger stewardship during the millennium. Okay, so in God's creation, there are stewards over all aspects of his creation. And part of my discovery process of this was when I did a study on angels, and I'm realizing that there are angels who are over all kinds of things. So I want to look at that too. Right now, there are stewards over God's creation, and some of these stewards are angels. Okay, and man is a steward as well. Okay, so I'm just going to point out a couple of things here. That in Revelation 14:8, we learn that there is an angel over fire. Okay, so there is an angel who is the steward of fire, whatever that means. There is another angel, and this is in Revelation 16:5, who is over water. Okay, we got two elements here, fire and water. There's another angel that we know of who is over the air, and that's Satan. He's the prince of the power of the air. That's his stewardship right now. There's another stewardship over the earth. Who has that? Who is the steward over the earth? Well, this is man. This is us. We have been given this stewardship. Now, Satan is trying to control it, okay, and he wants to gain it, and he will temporarily gain it through his son, who is a man, and that would be the Antichrist, okay? The Antichrist has the number of a man. He is a man, and he's going to live, he will die, he will rise from the dead and be indwelt by Apollyon, the angel from the bottomless pit, the one who is going to kill the two witnesses. Okay, so what we have here is fire, water, air, and earth, and we have stewards over these things. I did a video on the living creatures, and I talked about how the four living creatures control time-space. Okay, and that is a video I did on Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel. And every created being was given a job. It was given some kind of stewardship. And a stewardship is a job for which you are suited. Okay, it's a particular job for which you are suited. Now, Jesus said that when he goes into heaven, he's going to prepare positions for us. We already have a room, okay? We already have, a place to dwell in God's house. Now what we need is a job, because every single one of God's created stewards has a job. And Christ is going to be creating positions for his people. And there is going to be a position that has been designed specifically for you, that takes into account everything about you. And in fact, the things that you're going through in your life right now, Everything that's coming into your life right now is preparing you for the stewardship that you're going to be holding during the millennium. Okay, this is really important to understand. There isn't a rapture of a bride here. This is not bridal language. This is actually steward language. This is the language of sons. And remember, angels are called the sons of God. Angels are the current sons of God who have stewardships that go beyond the earth. Okay, that they're man just right now has a stewardship over the earth. Angels have various stewardships, and these are just some that I've listed, but there are many, many, many of them. Angels, all angels, I believe, have a stewardship. They have a position, they have a job, there is something that they're doing, okay, that they are responsible for. And every steward has to give an account. Even Jesus gave an account, and that's what the so-called high priestly prayer of John 17 is. This is when Jesus is giving an account of the stewardship of his disciples. And he said, I didn't lose anybody except for the son of perdition. I've told them everything that you communicated to me, and I taught them those things, and they now believe that I came from you and was sent by you, and that the words I had given them were your words. So this is an account of Jesus' stewardship. And then he handed this stewardship of these apostles back to God and said, you take care of them. Okay, because Jesus was going to be crucified. He was going to die, and they needed to be taken care of by somebody. So Jesus relinquished that stewardship back to the Father. We're talking about sons here. We're talking about sons who are going to be a part of a family, and everybody has a job. Everybody's going to have a position. Let's talk about these positions, okay? And a place has to do with place you live and work at the same time. It's your home and it's your job. Most of us who have jobs, we go somewhere else to work, and then we come home. But if your home and your job are the same thing, like you're a housekeeper, you're a nanny, you're a gardener for somebody who's really rich, you're somebody's personal assistant, you may have your own apartment, your own home within the larger estate. So there are angels right now, like Satan, who has a stewardship, who's going to have to give an account of his stewardship. And if they're faithless stewards, which Satan is, he's a faithless steward, they're going to be giving up their stewardship. They're going to lose it. Okay, they're going to lose it. Some of these stewardships are things that happen in heavenly places. They are higher order ruling and reigning. They are powers and principalities and dominions. Okay, these are positions that are currently being filled by angels. Some of them are good angels, and some of them are fallen angels. Some of them are wicked, and they're not following the Lord anymore, but they still have their stewardship. And they are not going to have to give up their stewardship until there is a replacement, till a replacement steward is found. And here's the part that was such a surprise to me as I'm doing my studies in Revelation and in other places. I realized that we are the ones who are going to be replacing this current group of the sons of God, especially the wicked ones. Now, I think if you're a good angel and you have a stewardship, you probably can go ahead and keep it. But there are going to be a lot of angels who are going to be cast out of heaven who have stewardships. Remember, if you're there, you have a job. It's not like you just wander around and twiddle your thumbs and, drink coffee all day. If you're an angel in heaven, you still have your stewardship, even if you're a faithless steward. And I know this is really hard to believe, but I'm just going to give you one little example here of what this looks like from Job chapter 1, verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God, okay, and these are angels, they're being called sons of God here, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Whence have you come?" And Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. So the idea here is that the angels here have to present themselves to God and to give an account. And so when Satan is presented, the Lord says to him, so where have you come from? What have you been up to? And he says, well, I've been walking around on the earth and, walking around. And then there's this discussion about Job. So what we see here is that fallen angels, including Satan, still have access to the throne room of God. They are still employed, as it were. They still have a job to do. And a lot of people think that Satan was cast out of heaven, that he doesn't have access to heaven. But those stewardships of things that are happening in heavenly places are, some of those guys are good and some are bad. And like in the book of Daniel, the prince of Persia withstood this angel, God's messenger who wanted to get through. There's a prince of Greece. These are angelic sons of God who have a stewardship. They have not been kicked out of their job yet. They're not unemployed yet. So that won't happen until their replacement group comes in. You've got to have the replacements before you get rid of the old employee who is faithless. Now we take a look at the book of Revelation. Revelation tells us when that final day of reckoning is going to happen, when enough replacements are in heaven to take care of the fallen angels who are going to be booted out. So this is Revelation 12, verse 7. Now war arose in heaven, and Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who's called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So once Michael cast Satan out, it says here there's no longer any place for them. Not that there wasn't like room for them to exist, but place and position go together. If you no longer have a position, you no longer have a place. You don't have a place in this family. You cannot live here and you're not going to work here. Just like, somebody who's a governess in somebody's home and lives there and works there. If they're getting kicked out of their job, they lose their position and they lose their place. It's connected. These are things that are connected in Scripture. And we know from other things that we read about in Revelation that Satan will be cast out of heaven and his angels just before the abomination of desolation. Okay. There's a 10-day time of tribulation on the earth. And, I believe that what's happening on earth finds its reflection, is reflected from whatever's going on in heaven. This 10 days is when the fifth seal martyrs are killed. It's over a period of time, over 10 days. This is Revelation 2, talks about in the letter to the church of Smyrna, you'll have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful unto death, I'll give you the crown of life. So this is the fifth seal martyrs. And usually what's going on in heaven is going to have a reflection on the earth. So this is when the war in heaven takes place. Okay, during this 10 days. And this is when Satan and them will be cast out right here. And this is actually the day that the Antichrist will rise from the dead. And this is when Satan is thrown out. Okay, so at this point in time right here, the male child who's been caught up to God and to his throne, we have all the fifth seal martyrs, and we'll also have the rapture of the 144,000, which will occur on this day as well. So there are so many believers already in heaven that they are able to take up the positions that these angels held during their time in heaven. There's enough new sons of God to be able to do that. And that's the language that Revelation uses. It uses the language of sons. There is the woman's son, who's the firstborn, who's the elder, the ruler, the one who's going to be caught up to God and to his throne. And then the woman has other offspring. Okay, and the other offspring are also going to be caught up to God and to his throne, but that's not until over here. And that's when the third rapture will take place. That's just prior to the day of the Lord. And then the second coming is right here. Okay, and this is on the Day of Atonement. When this happens, we don't know, and how much time after the abomination until that third rapture takes place, we don't know. Done videos on the 3 raptures that we see in the book of Revelation. But what's happening here is that the sons of God, who in the beginning, when God created the earth, the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God, rejoiced, or something like that. That's in Job as well. Let's just take a look at that. Job 38. Start with verse 4. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. The morning stars, we're talking about angels. Sons of God, again, we're talking about angels. This is when God was creating the heavens and the earth, and he made everything good, including all of the angels. And it says that the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy. We're going to be given the morning star. Christ is the bright morning star. In the letters to the 7 churches, one of the promises that we have is that we are going to be given the morning star. And I think what this is referring to is this role as sons of God, where we have a stewardship, just like the sons of God had, that we read about in the Bible. All of these angels have stewardships, and fallen ones continue to hold those stewardships until they are replaced by us. Before Satan and all of his angels are cast out of heaven, they're going to try to hold on to their positions and their place. And they're not going to be able to do that. And there are already plenty of believers in heaven to take over the jobs that these angels had. So the idea here is not about we're going to be taken to this little honeymoon suite that's attached to the Father's house. The idea here is we're being given a position, a stewardship, and this is consistent with Jesus' teaching. Jesus taught about stewards over and over and over again, about being a faithful steward, about stewards who were unfaithful. And he taught about sons who were faithful and sons who were faithless, and sons who were faithless and then came back and repented. He's talking about sons and positions in that passage in John 14. He's going to prepare a stewardship for us, a position. So it makes sense that we have a place. Places and positions go together in New Testament thought. So when the Bible tells us that we have dominion, for example, we have dominion over the earth, God gave that dominion to mankind. This is our stewardship. Okay, this is our stewardship, and it doesn't belong to any angel. This is part of what makes Satan so angry, is that the stewardship of everything else in God's creation belongs to Elohim, who are like spirit beings. But when Jesus talked to the scribes and Pharisees who had a problem with him saying that he was the Son of God, he said, the psalmist said that you are all sons of God. You are all Elohim. You're all rulers. And that's true because all mankind has dominion. We're all sons of God in that sense. And I've done a whole video series on what that means, the Elohim and sons of God, and I'll maybe leave a link to that in the description box below. But I hope you can understand, I hope you can see, and I hope I've made my case for the idea that we're not looking at the rapture of a bride to go to some kind of add-on to heaven. There's already plenty of room. What we're looking for now, what Jesus is doing, is he knows every single one of us. Every single one of us. Jesus said, that he chose you. He chose you from before the foundation of the world that you would be holy and blameless. And he's preparing a place for you, a position, a job that's suited just for you, that's perfect for you. And everything in your life right now, all the trials, all the hardship, all the pain, all the good stuff, all the promotions, all of the even devastating things that he allows into your life, they're here for your perfection. They're here to prepare you for the world to come. They're getting you ready for glory and for a job. A lot of us think about jobs and work and we go, oh, I can't wait till I retire and I don't have to work, and I just hate going to work every day. Well, that's a job that is not the kind that Jesus is talking about. He's talking about the kind of job that he gave Adam in the garden. Here's this beautiful place. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about shelter. You don't have to worry about wild animals or disease or anything. You can eat anything except from the fruit from that one tree, and just tend the garden. Just tend it, prune it, enjoy it, name some animals. There's stuff for you to do here. And it's a beautiful place without all the trials that come from like our jobs now. We're not talking about jobs. We're talking about stewardship. And Jesus is preparing the place for you. He's preparing a position for you in that place. And the Holy Spirit is preparing you right now to be ready to walk into that position on the day that Jesus returns for us, the day that we're caught up to God into his throne. So I hope this has been an encouraging video. Leave a question if you have one in the comment section below, and we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.